Welcome everybody to our CWI meeting for October on having a say in federal and state policies, strategies to elect feminists. And we have a special thank you today to our leader, Connie Cordovilla. Today is Connie's birthday. And Connie just said she's 75 today. So
That's right.
Wish her a really happy birthday. And if I could sing, I'd lead in singing happy birthday, but Connie's the singer in the group.
Don't do it because it's a mess when you do it on, believe me, the chorus I'm in never sings together on Zoom.
The sentiment is all there, and happy birthday, and thank you for taking on this important meeting on your birthday.
Right. Well, it's an important meeting, you're right, because, you know, people have this thing about voting. They think someone else will do it or it's going to happen by magic, but I got news for them. They're the magic for it. So here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to the CWI-House on Women's Issues session today, having a say in the federal and state policies, strategies to elect feminists. Because we have come to realize how inextricably the choices we make in everyday society are bound to the laws and the policies that are adopted in local, state, and federal government, we decided today to focus on voting behavior of feminists, both male and female, and the areas where we might strengthen the appeal for folks to register and get out to vote. Because that's the one thing is getting registered. The most important thing is getting them out to vote. So, at any rate, let me here. So we have 3 speakers on the agenda, but I hope that all of you will have something to say and contribute or ask before our session is over. We ask that you put your questions in the chat and we will get to them when the speakers have finished. I'm going to lead off by talking about the process of registration, voting, being an election officer, the electoral board, the election day procedures, and the integrity of the election. This task fell to me because I've been an election officer in Fairfax County for over 20 years now, and I've worked for 30 years in the National Office of the Labor Union and got sent out regularly on the fall campaigns for stints. Then you're going to hear from Katherine or Kobby Hoffman, who's administering a Now Get Out the Vote grant to recruit young college students to vote. She is the Executive Vice President of Virginia Now, and she's the National Eastern District Representative for 8 states, including Delaware, District of Columbia, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia. So presently, she works as a grants and contracts administrator for a Ryan White HIV/AIDS program. Kobby's going to discuss strategies for reaching young feminist voters, such as the work of Virginia Now and the Feminist Majority with college students to get out the vote. Then we have Madalene Mielke. She's president and CEO of the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. She's a nationally recognized civil rights leader with 25 years of experience in political campaigns, training, and fundraising. And we're delighted that she will share her wisdom on effective strategies to support the implementation of progressive and feminist political goals, particularly among the varied Asian American populations. She's graduated from Tulane University and is a mentor of the Newcomb College Institute Women to Women Mentoring Program and the Georgetown University Politics Mentoring Program. So I'm going to begin by laying out the groundwork of how we want our feminists to use electoral power to change policies. As I said, the most important thing is to register. And as soon as I find my first page, we're at it. That's what you get for going through your papers, see? Okay, registration. So one of the things we have to do for people, especially when they come from different cultural and voting backgrounds, is to ensure that they understand registration is necessary and how it needs to be done, and to make it easy for people to register, not to throw blockades in their way. So registration rules are usually set up by your Department of Elections in the state where you live. And for here in Virginia, up to 22 days before the general election, you can register. Some states even have same-day registration. We have not hit that mark yet. They have to be a U.S. citizen, In this state, you have to be 18 years old or going to be 18 years old when the general election takes place. So sometimes 17-year-olds can register and actually vote in a primary if in fact they're going to be 18 by the time that that the general election is held. And so I think that's a very welcoming kind of thing to do for young people. Let's see. Where do you get registration forms? Well, there's online registration by computer. There's a local voter registration office. I know where ours is in Fairfax County. And you can also download PDFs of the registration form in various languages. And that's one thing I want to emphasize. We are a diverse culture, both in DC and out here in the suburbs, and in fact, across America. And we need to be able for people to access in their own language the information that they need to give. So I think that's very important. So let's see, there's various other things. You can get them at SNAP offices. You can get them when you get your driver's license. You can sign up to register to vote. And there are voter registration drives. Now, the trick there is that groups who agree to register have to get their forms in by a certain day, or the group gets fined like something like $1,000 a form that's not turned in on time. So you have to be very, very careful about how that is done. Now, getting to vote on the election day. When you go to the polls here in Virginia, you do have to have ID. So what does that mean? It means you got to have a driver's license or a DMV issued ID card, a valid employee ID card that has your photograph, a U.S. military ID, a valid student ID issued by public or private schools of higher education. Now, that means college students who come from other places could vote here if they register in this state and they register with their dorm, and therefore they are allowed to vote on the campus. They will have to change that voting registration when they go back home to vote the next time, but it's there. Let's see, student ID with a photograph from a public high school for those that are at 17 or 18. Valid U.S. passport, government issued ID card from a federal, Virginia, or local political subdivision, a voter ID card issued by the Department of Elections, a voter confirmation documents, and so on. All of those things, we have a vast array, and they're there so that we can encourage people that you don't need just one form of identification. And if you don't have a driver's license, you're out of luck. That's not true. So now, when people show up at the polls and they don't have that important piece of information, that's their identification, they are not out of luck. They are allowed to either sign a certificate of affirmation, which swears under penalty of federal law that they in fact are who they say they are and live at the address that's listed in the poll book, and are allowed to, they're given a regular ballot in that case. But those affidavits of information are strictly looked at to be sure that that's right. And if they don't want to do that, or they don't think they don't want to sign that affirmation, they can, I'm sorry, let me get this straight. There's a thing called a provisional ballot. So if you arrive without acceptable form of identification or refuse to sign the ID confirmation statement, you're given the opportunity to vote a provisional ballot on the understanding that that ballot, nothing will happen to it until you go to the electoral board and plead your case with your identification that that is who you are. So that to me is creating another trip you have to make, but at times there are people who want to do that. And so they have until noon on the Friday after an election to do that in Virginia. I suspect it's probably the same amount of time in other states, but I haven't checked that out. So even if you don't have your ID and you want to vote, you can vote a provisional ballot as long as you understand that you have to go to the place that's specified to show people your ID and prove who you are. Let's see. Elections in Virginia, I think, are free of fraud. They're verified. Every ballot is verified. They actually did a sample of ballots from the 2020 election, and they found that the amount of fraud was that they were looking for, the level that would have forced them to a recount was 0.1%. They found 0.0006% of possibly ballots that might not be correct. And so that's a very high rate, and that's worked very well. And it's very secure because you know when you vote, it's safe and secure, thanks to all of the safeguards that they use. And I know they use safeguards because I've been involved in those safeguards for 25 years. So then the most important thing I'd love to do with the young feminists is to inspire them to become election officers. You know, I'm not always going to be around. I've been doing this a while, and, you know, times are catching up with me. So we need to enforce that younger people, that people who have a different language ability, so that people who come and need translational help in filling out their ballot will have it. People that look like them is very important. And it's just we have to get that straight, and so people do it. An officer of the election has to, of course, be a citizen of the United States. Jeez Louise. And so we are, where were we? We were talking about, I've got to be an election officer. Let's see. You can be appointed by an electoral board. That's one possibility. You can also fill out a form, and everyone who comes in front of me when I'm entering them in the poll book, which is the book we use to keep track of who's come to vote, I say to them, you too could have this lovely job. You're paid almost minimum wage for the 16 hours or 17 hours that you work here. And it's worth it because, you know, then you've had a hand in the vote. So I would think that would be something that would appeal to folks. Let's see. The one thing you do have when you are an election officer is that you will have poll observers from each party that's represented. And we also balance our officers. I am not in my regular poll for this election because we are heavily Democratic in this area. So they had filled in all the Democratic slots. So they sent me over to another adjacent precinct in order to be at that election, because then it balanced out. We had the appropriate number of Republicans and Democrats there. So there are different jobs that people do in the polls. Some people are greeters, telling people when they come in what to get in line, where to look at the sample ballots and so on. And that's an important thing. We do put our sample ballots up in all the languages that we offer for the ballot so that people can see them. We have poll book officers. That's the person you walk up to and hand your ID to and checks your ID. If it's a driver's license, our system actually scans it. The ballot officer is the person sitting at the table that hands you the ballot yourself. You got a voting equipment and booth officer, the people who make sure the voting machines, that the people, there's virtually no way except sideways to put your ballot in wrong in a Virginia voting machine, although I've seen it tried. It takes it upside down, forwards, backwards, whatever, and it tabulates your vote. And it gives you a little sign that says you have voted, at which point your proudest job is giving people a sticker that says, I have voted, because that means they've participated in the process. And we always make a big deal of the first time. When we have a first time voter, we hoot and clap and holler because it's really important. Now, the precinct is overseen by a chief officer who's somebody who has a lot of experience. I have been an assistant chief, but we have a very competent chief officer in my poll, and so I don't ever challenge him. That person is the one who's responsible for picking up the materials, making sure the room gets set up, has to run to the Fairfax County Election Office with the completed ballots at the end of the day, and so on. And let's see, then there's an electoral board that facilitates the election by determining the validity of the provisional ballots that you've gotten and certifies and reports the results to the state. We post our results from our precinct on the front window of the school where we are. We do that before we leave the polls the night of the election so that the people in the neighborhood can go and see how the vote went in their precinct. And then the county generally publishes it the next day for all of the precincts. Let's see. We know that we have long days in the polls. They start at 5 in the morning and they end somewhere around 9 o'clock at night, unless you got a problem, and then it can go on until about 11 until you find the end of the problem. but those long days are worth it because A, you get to meet all your neighbors, and B, you get to encourage people to vote. And that's really the thing that makes it for me. So with that, I am going to, oh, let me just talk for a minute. We have had an election integrity board established by Jason Mayares, who is our Attorney General. And the idea of that election integrity board, let me see if I can find my notes somewhere. Oh, I had it. The point of it was to make sure that we had absolutely valid elections. Well, never in my 25 years or 20 years have I seen any kind of hunky dinks with the voting. We've always been very careful about reporting it and getting it there. I see this as either full employment for people, perhaps for a while during or after the election, but they want to pass a law that says we can use no electronic equipment. Everything has to be on paper. We should hand tabulate the paper at the polls. Now think about how long that's going to delay the election results unless you have massive numbers of people. Okay, so this law that they suggested, it makes no sense for that at all to me. So that's my spiel. Is there and any questions you want to ask, be sure to put them in the chat. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Kobby.
Okay, I want to note that I speak for myself. For National Now, the spokesperson is the president, and that we have also a Now Foundation. And in this case, the Now Foundation, both National Now Inc. and foundations are not partisan. We have goals that we have worked on for many years, everything from equal rights in the Constitution, economic justice, violence against women, racial justice, LGBTQIA+ rights, the climate, and reproductive rights and justice. So we are anything impacting women are issues. And so there is a concern that younger folks, whether they are focused on what's going on in our society and government or not, is if they are registering to vote, and also when they are registered to vote. And there is a gap for that 18 to into the 20s for actually voting. So it's a matter of helping people become aware, and it's been shown that if you become a voter early on, that you tend to be a voter your entire life. So that is what we are encouraging. And we have reached out to students on campuses. We started towards the end of September, so it's a bit of a late start, but we have some that are active, and they are just intriguing what they come up with. Everything from having puppies to pat, which you know are going to get lots of attention, and then they give you voting information and ask you what your voting plan is for that individual day. Because if you have a plan, you're much more likely to go through with it. To having an upcoming day where they're going to be giving out donuts, don't forget to vote, and having a trolley to take you to your precinct and to be able to vote. So it's quite a variety, but it's, they keep it fun. And I think that's really important, and it's so critical. This is a year where Virginia has become probably I'm told, in the top 10 for access for voters. You can actually go and register to vote now, but then you have to cast a provisional ballot, and it goes to the election board that Connie was talking about. And they will see that all is in order and cast your vote. So considering that an individual is on a campus for likely 2 to 4 years, that can be a significant thing that they can decide that yes, they want to vote, and they can go and do so. And then those who have already registered, carving out the time and doing it. So, you know, vote, it's easy. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Did you talk about your, the cookies and the other stickers and you should talk.
They've come up with sort of flyers that are, you know, not only the one that's from the state, you know, the basic one, that the state has a flyer that gives you the kind of information that Connie gives you, but also they've made it fun. They have cookies that say to vote. They have pumpkins there. They've painted on there to vote. So, and when you do that, then you get, you know, a pumpkin cup with a bunch of information in it and stickers that say to vote. And so, yes, it's a matter of helping the community focus on voting. And, you know, people, human beings, we tend to say, oh, right, it's the same reason why when you voted, they give you the sticker, I have voted, because it helps remind other people and make it important for them to go and do so.
Did you talk about the trolley?
The trolley, yeah, definitely. And they actually have done that in past years. So it's just one more way to make things simple and to keep things interesting and fun. Yeah, you can go with your friends on the trolley and go to the precinct and vote. Yeah. So they're intriguing because young people, they're dedicated and they are creative and they come up with all kinds of wonderful ways to reach out to each other.
Okay, well, we will, let's move on then to Madalene. Madalene, if you would like to do your talk.
Thanks, Connie. I'm Madalene Mielke, President and CEO of APAICS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. APAICS, we were founded in 1994 by former Secretary Norman Y. Mineta and former Guam delegate Robert Underwood to increase Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander representation throughout the electoral process, from community advocate to elected leader. So alongside our sister organization, the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, KPAC, which is composed of all of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander members of the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. APAICS fulfills this mission by conducting signature programs, which are paid congressional internships and fellowships, as well as leadership development programs to encourage more AA and NHPIs to run for elected office. As a nonpartisan national organization, APAICS works to demystify the process and make government more accessible. So I want to give you a little bit of context in regards to the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community. We're not a monolith, and so that's the reason why you see the distinction between Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. According to the July 2022 Asian American Voter Survey published by Asian Pacific Islander American Vote, API Vote, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, and API data, more than 2/3 of registered Asian American surveys say they plan to vote, but only about half have been contacted by either of the major parties. So 52% of Asian Americans said that they have not been contacted at all by the Democratic Party in the past year. And 60% of Asian Americans say they have not been contacted at all by the Republican Party in the past year. And as the fastest growing demographic, the Asian American community grew by 81% between 2000 and 2019. And the population is projected to pass 35 million by 2060. And so this is a reminder for folks in regards to how the community is growing, is that we're not growing by birth, we're growing by immigration. And so when you think about people coming from a wide swath of the Asian countries of origin, those countries may be countries that don't have democracy. Those countries might be places where you find immigrants and refugees coming to the United States with a large distrust of government and what democracy means to us. And so when you think about why it's important for people to vote, it's not the same story as you would think about in general, American population. And so the guilt that sometimes goes with the shame with not voting doesn't necessarily work with the Asian American community per se, because it's not something that was built into the society of which the countries of origin where they have come from. So when you come here, the belief of having to vote is not something that you would see as a priority. Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders were the third fastest growing group, growing by 61% from 2000 to 2019. And their population is projected to pass 2 million by 2030. So New York, California, Texas, and Hawaii have seen their AAPI populations more than double over the last 2 decades. Nevada has seen a full 167% increase in the AAPI population since 2000. Arizona grew by 157% and North Carolina by 154% in that same period. And so in 2020, the AAPI population had an historic voter turnout. We expect the same thing will happen in 2022. And so as the highest growth of any racial group in 2020 with a 47% increase in voters. So this is completely an overlooked demographic, and a lot of times for campaigns and other communities in the sense of reaching out early and often to make sure that the AA and HPI community knows that it's time to vote and why they should vote. This increase in the last election in 2020 was a milestone despite a rise of anti-Asian hate and violence and a global pandemic that shut down the US economy. Asian American registered voters as a whole were more likely to say they would vote for Democratic candidates compared to Republican candidates in the House and Senate elections. And so, as I said earlier, we're not a monolith. So among national origin groups, Indian Americans were the most likely to say they would vote for Democratic candidates, while Vietnamese Americans were split in the Senate or leaned toward the Republican candidates in the House. And so we have, as I mentioned, this Asian American voter survey, which I'm happy to drop into the chat. You can read more about that data disaggregation amongst the different ethnic groups in the Asian American community. And so when you think about how Asian American registered voters think of themselves, 44% of them think of themselves as Democrats, 19% think of themselves as Republicans, and 29% consider themselves independent. So there is a lot of gap in the sense of there are folks who don't have a political affiliation or don't choose to state that they think of themselves as associated with any political party. In regards to issues, Asian Americans care about healthcare the most, with an 88% interest, with jobs and the economy right behind that at 86%, crime at 85%, education at 82%, gun control at 73%, and the environment. And so all of these are considered very important issues in that order. And so you need to think about how when you approach an Asian American, again, through that data disaggregation, you'll see how they vary in regards to all of those issues. 77% of those surveyed agreed that the United States should have stricter gun laws, with 61% agreeing strongly. And then you also have, by a 2-to-1 margin, Asian Americans who are registered to vote oppose bans on books and bans on lessons about racism and American history by state, local governments, or school boards. So language access is an important issue amongst Asian Americans because we have such a wide swath of countries. We don't have a shared common language. And so 42% of Asian American registered voters speak a language other than English at home, and that they would use in language voting assistance. And so that means you need materials that are directed to them in language to help them better understand the issues when you're asking them to vote about something, and also to remind them to vote in language. And so it's important for them to see that there's another language, that their home language, that they can better understand the issues. And then about half, 51% of Asian American registered voters surveyed say they prefer to cast their ballots by mail or drop-off box rather than in person at a polling place. Some of that is due to the anti-Asian hate that you see and sort of the feeling of potential public safety of going to a polling place and maybe not seeing someone who looks like them as a poll worker, as Connie has mentioned in her remarks earlier. And so being able to have the safety of being able to vote and mail your ballot or drop it off makes voting for Asian Americans much easier. And then the way they get their news, which obviously is critical when it comes to making decisions, as we see tons of ads going up in regards to the upcoming election. Television is the most common news source at 65%, and then Facebook, which is nearly as common as a news source as traditional print. And so newspapers and Facebook, this is all part of, in that survey, you can see that it's really a matter of trust. They don't really trust their local electeds. They don't trust the federal electeds, but they do trust their friends and family. So birds of a feather flock together. And so if you find folks who are in their immediate friends and family circle, you're able to connect with those people who would not necessarily vote if their friends and family are doing it. And then for some groups, such as Vietnamese Americans, YouTube is also considered a highly regarded news source. My colleagues over at the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, NAPAF, published in March of 2022 a survey on Asian American women. And so nearly 3 in 4, which is 74% of AA and HPI women, report experiencing racism and or discrimination over the past 12 months, with more than half, 53%, reporting a stranger or someone that they don't know as the perpetrator. And so this anti-Asian hate has continued throughout the course of time, even though it doesn't get covered as nearly as much in the media. And so the safety of Asian American women and our elderly is at risk often at times, and even more so when you think about the potential of danger when it comes to voting of all things. And so we think that safety in public spaces is something that is a concern. And so when you think about how you want to approach an Asian American woman voter, you want to figure out how you can best make her feel comfortable in making sure that she feels that she can vote and that there are folks around her to support her if she chooses to do that in a more public setting.
That is a whole lot of information. Please do put the link to that if you have not already. I haven't been following my chat, but if you have not already, because I would love to be able to note that and send it out with the minutes of this meeting so that we have it. I think that's just great. Thank you. I know that there have been some done also for other groups, African Americans. I think the most important point you made is that no group is monolithic. When we talk about Hispanics, we're talking about Hispanics that come from a wide array of countries whose languages are not always the same, and who, have some of the very same fears because they come from places where votes were a problem. You didn't vote unless they absolutely were assured you were going to vote the way they wanted you to vote. And then if you couldn't give them that assurance, you just didn't go to the polls. So, that kind of thing is a real. I mean, it's hard to think that we're beginning to develop that kind of feeling here in the U.S. It's an antithesis to everything that we founded the country on. And it's just, I can't believe that our country is moving that far to the right, but we need to be vigilant. So Kobby put an interesting question in here. I don't know if you've had a chance to, the idea that my vote makes no difference. Well, it certainly will make no difference if in fact you don't vote. That's what I tell those kids when they say things, and it isn't just kids, it's also people my age who think, oh yeah, and then I say, you got no right to complain if you don't vote. You got every right to complain if you vote and things still don't get better. Then you do. But how do you answer that? Well, we need more education about how politics works. I couldn't agree more. Having been for 30 years with the American Federation of Teachers, I can tell you that our civics lessons suffer. I don't think the kids get near the education that they should get, and they don't get it early enough to get it. So that's a problem. But that's one. I see Lisa Sales has her hand up, and I will ask her to unmute. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to piggyback on some of the comments that Kobby, some of the remarks that Kobby offered. And also, I don't think those of us not on the panel can actually type in the chat questions. So I wanted you to make, wanted to
Oh,
make
no.
it. So that's not been enabled, at least I don't see it on my end. But
Sherry, yeah, please.
part of the strategy of going to college campuses, which Virginia now, National Organization for Women and Feminist Majority is doing in partnership in a very nonpartisan way, right? We're handing out half sheets of information, and the way we're approaching and getting college students, particularly women, is to go to women's centers, women's gender studies areas, political science departments, sociology departments, social work departments, maybe teaching colleges, as opposed to, for example, engineering schools. Why? Because we're finding we can locate more feminist women of all demographics, and we speak to them about the issues that they care about. And so what are the issues that college women on college campuses care most about today? Is abortion, the Equal Rights Amendment, the environment, guns, and voting rights. So that's how we're going after them, and going after rather their vote. And so we're telling them a little bit about the candidates on both sides of the aisle and what they stand for in terms of the issues. So I just thought that would be helpful to add to the conversation. Thanks, and great, Madalene, great information. Some surprising statistics there, and I can't wait to dive into what you put in the chat when you can put it in there. Thanks.
Right. We also have a question from Karen Humphrey. How has the overturning of Roe v. Wade affected interest of young women and men in registering and voting? Has anybody seen any kind of survey on that?
Yeah, actually, there is a new survey that just came out with the Feminist Majority. It was done with Lake Research Partners.
Oh, yes,
They
Linda.
focused on 9 different states that could go one way or the other. Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. You know, we hear in the media a lot about raising prices and inflation, and we are all feeling that as a top issue for this election. But there shows that abortion and equal rights and women's rights are actually the most important for young women as they go to the ballot box. And it was quite significant. It is 22 points over as a driver for the inflation. And really, that is a huge, significant item. You know, we have the Equal Rights Amendment is fully ratified. It's been noted that in the US House for 2 years since the Virginia actually is the last needed state to ratify. The Senate has not dealt with questions of a time limit in a preamble that the states actually have not voted on. These are, you know, just facts of where we are. When the Supreme Court came out with their decision, that has impacted young people, particularly people who are low income, who have less choices. And then, of course, for us, for the last several years, has been huge, the gun violence and violence against women, and whether it's targeted. I mean, it's been appalling, the Asian women and the massacre, the things that have happened to individuals who are Black or people of color in general. So young people are very focused on these kinds of issues. They're very focused on climate issues and making things better for all of us. And it's really showing in these polls, and it will be very interesting to see how they vote. Part of the reason that we focused on folks who are 18 to 29 is because their gap is 16% less historically actually coming out and voting, as well as just the Americans in general. About half of the people are not registered to vote. So we have a right and a power that is very frequently not utilized. So I hope that's helpful. I could get this link for you and try to put it in the chat for you as well. Or get it.
That'd be great. Okay, how about some of our folks in the audience? There, do you guys have questions, concerns, statements?
Hi,
Go
I'd like to ask if anybody has noticed any instances of voter suppression during this midterm pre-election.
I haven't yet. I was in Las Vegas last Saturday, this past Saturday. The early vote started there on this past Saturday. So large rallies going on across the state to have the early vote locations open and ready for people to go. So, you know, and also I was just in Los Angeles, Irvine last week as well. And so lots of people, lots of, enthusiasm of trying to get out the vote. So not quite yet. My colleagues over at API Vote, which handles a lot of our voter registration and voter protection for the community, they also have a hotline that is also for in language in case there's anyone who's experiencing any challenges while they go to vote. And so that hotline will be open for those people who have already started in voting. So I'm happy to also share that number too.
We have heard in the news a number of states, everything from Georgia talking about whether you can give somebody water or whether they wait in line, to the decreasing of allowing individuals to make it more difficult for them to put in their votes or make their votes as they have previously. Virginia is in the last couple of years has moved from having a number of barriers to voting, and I say this as I've been an election official for about 12 years or so. It used to be you couldn't do absentee without a proper reason that was acceptable. These things have all, Virginia uniquely in that way has really moved itself into probably the top 10 of states where you have access for voting. And the fact that you can actually still register right now and in early voting and put in a provisional that will be reviewed by the election board all the way to the actual November 8th, the election day, is a whole new world for access in Virginia. But at the same time, I just think I saw a news report and from the ACLU that there were self-appointed militia who were taping and taking videos of people going to ballot boxes in Arizona. So we have a different approach to what has been happening, and how election workers who are just trying to make sure that the playing field is level and everyone has an opportunity to vote has been questioned. And so we are in a difficult time. And I think it has pointed out that people's power to vote is all the more important.
Thank you. Connie, you're muted.
Okay, is there anybody else who has something to share? I'm going to put the Kobby survey in here from Lisa.
It's in there. I got the everyone. You don't have to do it again.
Okay, all right. All right, well, what are we going to do about this, ladies? I'm not going to sit down and take this. You need to get up and get busy. We should be busy. We should have been busy for a while now, actually. And I think a lot of people have been actually busy out there. How many people do you have working on your project, Cobbs? You know?
How many people involved?
Yeah, how many people are involved?
So it went on a particular campus. We tried to have someone commit to being a coordinator, and then to have organizers working with them, and that students can choose. You know, they might be putting up flyers in all the dorms, or they may be tabling. We're doing organizing of events and speaking to people one-on-one for their own personal voting plan. So generally speaking, you want to have one coordinator and anywhere from 3 to 5 organizers. It's hard to be an only one, and it's great to have a group of people all move in the same direction. Yeah. So it's, I think, something that needs to be done, has been done effectively in the past when Virginia was working for having equality candidates, you know, equal rights. But when you're dealing with just voter rights, and I'm working with a foundation, you don't get involved with candidates at all. Stay out of that. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
So does that mean that there are very few feminist organized voter panels and forums?
In terms of, there are many different organizations making many efforts. I think that there's been a lot of money and resources that have flowed into Virginia for particular candidacies. You can read about that in the news. Virginia does not have strong election laws. What is really different in Virginia's situation this year is the fact that for a number of years, people have been working to eliminating gerrymandering. That's where the legislatures used to draw the map for the precincts themselves, and they would, whoever was in power would make that to their benefit, and generally all the different parties and such did that. We got to a unique spot, I've been told, in which neither of the major parties were sure that they were going to win, and they still involved legislators. Many of you may be aware of this. They had citizens appointed, basically trying to be geographic, and they had legislators appointed, and it became a stalemate between them.
Yeah.
But they did have a fallback position, which it went to the courts, and the courts basically appointed individuals to draw the map in an unbiased manner. And that is what is happening this time. And so we have a lot of our precincts have changed, but they are much more competitive. And we actually will have, I think in 2 years, a fully elected legislature that have been in competitive districts.
Right.
And so that will put Virginia in a very different place. You have some states where it appears that they have gerrymandered in a big way and have been able to hold on to power, particularly even when there's a minority view that is not reflective of the citizens at large, which is a increasing concern on the part of many people. So I hope that is helpful.
Yet another way we need to influence things in terms of how decisions are made. Because we need to have people who are favorable, who are feminists in perspective that are on those boards. Problem is getting them appointed. That's hard.
Well, there's been a lot of more individuals who, that are, I mean, really it is a matter of putting power and having citizens being able to be heard and fully represented in our legislature. And there was historically, now we've had several waves where a huge number, 15 or more women and feminists have been elected into the Virginia legislature. And as a result, that the Equal Rights Amendment was ratified. And everyone knew it going in. And it, for 10 years or so, it had gone through the Senate like 6 times, but it made no way in the House. And it finally went through the House. So we may be looking at a great change. And as best we can tell, the fairness of eliminating gerrymandering in the Commonwealth of Virginia may become very significant as we move forward.
All right. Is there anyone else? Let's see what's come up in the chat.
Can I ask if people have some particularly good strategies for now until election day? What is it? 14 days we have left to make sure we get out the feminist votes. For example, Karen, what does National Women's Political Caucus suggest as really good strategies for getting the feminist vote out?
Oh, let's hear Karen.
Thanks, Sue. NWPC gets in. We really are a grassroots organization, and we find that being in and campaigns are increasingly able to manage a good grassroots effort. Text banking has become a very useful strategy for particularly young people. Phone banking still works. Walking door to door still works. As for people of my age, I don't do that very much anymore, but I'm learning the and most of the text banking and phone banking anymore is done online. You don't even have to go to a location to do it. You can work with a campaign. NWPC tries to make, we're not active in every state, but we have nationally endorsed candidates. We have state endorsed candidates in a number of states, including California. We have some local chapters around the country that also endorse local candidates. And our effort is to both publicize our support for the specific candidates we're endorsing, and also to try to push our members to get involved. Social media, anybody who wants to promote voting and involvement by younger people needs to be into social media. I am not a social media person, but we have been actively recruiting young people to do everything: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. The various platforms vary from who they reach, but TikTok, I guess. So you need to get involved with young people. You need to recruit them if they're really interested and get them to help you reach out to other young people. So we're finding the social media outreach is helpful. But the other thing that, and I think for younger women, abortion has already been mentioned here today, is hugely important. But we need to be doing a lot more education of young people in general on women's rights and voters' rights and other similar issues. Their democracy is slipping away. So it can't just all be done at election time. You've got to start building strategies. And now Feminist Majority Foundation has been wonderful. NWPC does some voter education, but our focus is on endorsing and supporting women. So, and there's a lot of new, there's Moms Rising, there's Moms in Office, there is Fund Her, which is a California-based group, a number of women's political funds in various locations. So I would encourage people to get online and see what's going on in their own state, since this is a national group. And I just, but starting with the major organizations that are already identified here is a good way to start. And thank you for this. I personally believe that people who don't vote from the time that they're old enough to vote should be fined and sent to jail, but that's not a very democratic process. So
I'm not gonna win them over either.
I have never missed an election in my life, and I don't plan to, even when I lose.
I'd like to add to what Karen said, because I agree completely that this is not just something to be focused on at election time. This is something that to be focused on continually. It's so critical to all of our well-being. This last weekend, I was involved with a discussion group of leaders in community groups and leaders on the local campus. I'm located in Charlottesville, and the students were expressing that they know that they are relying on information with the social media and not getting a complete picture, and that things can go viral that are not truthful. And so that kind of fact checking that we relied on with newspapers and their reputations, that things move so fast now, it's really a different thing. But at the same time, each of us, as we become a voting age, we need to understand what Connie was describing originally on how it works and what our democracy is. And I loved the expression that essentially the democracy is allowing the citizens to rule as like crowdsourcing decision making, and that's why we can't have the gerrymandering, and why it is so important for all the states in the U.S. To not have a small group of people holding power and not representing all the citizens. If that's helpful, thank you.
And Madalene, since you're in Georgia, what strategies are you noticing that might be particularly helpful for getting out the progressive vote there?
I think it's they're doing a lot of direct mail and canvassing, so hopefully that's enough to encourage voters to participate. So they need to also look at making sure that they have enough votes to not trigger a recount, and then go into, if there's a runoff. So, and the runoff would be a month after. And so the time frame is very tight.
Yeah. All right. So where do we want to go from here? I think we want to think about what we can do to encourage the people we know to make sure they get out to vote, to make sure that they're registered. And my understanding in Virginia is if you register at the Board of Elections on the day of the election and you file a provisional ballot, they can make a decision to allow that vote to count. Now that's what I've been told. I don't ever have to test that because I've been registered since God was a little boy. But
Yeah, you go to your precinct and you can do that. You can register.
you can do that, right?
And you do
That's when I get
ballot,
somebody
and
who
several
hasn't.
days later, the election board.
Yeah.
released it.
When I get someone who hasn't changed their address and they don't
Oh, yeah.
done it correctly, I make them file a new election form, even if we can give them a ballot, because we know that they've lived. We have time deadlines from the last November election 2 years ago. Where have they lived? If they've still lived or if they moved after that, then they can vote, et cetera, et cetera. We have a what if situation. And we do publish what ifs every year because it's how we keep us straight. But yeah, so the provisional ballot is a tool, but you have to have the time to go run back. And a lot of our young people don't. They, I will tell you this, in Virginia, if you work a poll, your employer can't fire you for working the poll that day. They would be up for civil or for criminal charges if they tried to.
This year it's a holiday. Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, the one good thing about this Integrity Commission is that they suggested that they make voting day a national holiday. And I think that's an excellent idea. They do it in other countries and they get massive turnouts. We have had voting here in Falls Church for Peru and for, I think, Argentina at the high school. You couldn't get within a mile of the high school. There were so many cars there for the people voting. So that's the thing that has to happen. I don't know, but we've got to fix this problem, and we've got to get our young people on board. And we also have to get people my age who say, no, I'm going to let it be. No, you can't let it be. This is your job. You're a citizen. You need to do it. So anyway, I want to thank our speakers. They were absolutely wonderful. Sue, do you have anything you need to add?
Well, I was just having two comments. The first comment is one you just mentioned on voting day. Making it a federal holiday. I'm wondering if that is still so necessary, since everybody or a lot of people are favoring early voting, voting by mail, etc., drop boxes. If the proportion of people who are voting not just on election day is increasing, is it still important to have a national holiday on election day? Wonder what people think about that.
I think, well, you know what my thoughts on it are. So how about the rest of y'all? Alana, do you have an opinion?
Wonder why I knew you were gonna call me. No, I don't.
I'm thinking this is Alana. She works at NASA, but she's also on our board.
Yeah, what was the question again? Go ahead again.
Sue, state your question.
The question was, since so many are enjoying voting by mail or other types of early voting, is it still highly important to have a national elections or voting day as a national holiday? Or is it better to emphasize more of the making sure that there's national availability of early voting and voting by mail?
I can only speak for myself. I personally don't think so. because I think that if you're gonna vote, you're gonna vote anyway. I generally try and go and vote early because I don't want to get involved in all of that, those long lines on necessarily voting day. But I think if you're gonna vote, you're gonna vote. And I think it's important that you vote. I think it would be good. I think it would be good if it was a holiday, but I don't think it's necessary if you're a committed voter. You're gonna vote anyway.
Holly had something?
We haven't talked very much about, and it's the influence of money. And also we're kind of a select group here because we're all here because we're passionate about voting. But I wonder how many people are thinking more and more that it's becoming more and more unseemly and they don't want to have anything to do with it. And I'm just going to give you one example because we have people in all jurisdictions. I was at the doctor's office, so I'm sitting there and I saw something that I'd never see usually because I don't watch television during the day, but I'm in a doctor's office in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I'm hearing two ads that I'm citing. One is saying how awful Abigail Spanberger is, person in Congress in Virginia, and that followed by someone who said, I was a former Republican congressman and I'm for Abigail Spanberger because she's the most wonderful person. And at the same time, let me just add that I'm hearing also a report that there are many people in this area who do not have the money for one meal. Now, there's a real, I just got to point out the disconnect here. You know, how much money was spent on those two ads that reached me and it has no effect on me. You know, it's criminal.
Yeah.
What can you say?
Yeah. Can I jump in?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, first on the question of a national election day, good point was made that employers ought to have one that they had to observe. Even if we're made Sunday, a lot of people have to work on Sunday. So one way or the other, but there are many states that are right now in the process of undoing a great many of the options they have for early voting, for drop boxes, for vote by mail. So I see the potential of a real rollback. And I think the other thing that's important would be worth an interesting discussion for this organization in the future. All of this stuff that's happening right now, including the overwhelming impact of money and how can you trust a TV, and the more negative ads there are just in volume, the more it drives people away from the polls. They just don't want to be bothered. But this is no accident. There are very well organized, sophisticated, well-funded organizations and individuals out there who have, Citizens United was part of their goal. The elimination of abortion was part of their goal. Their basic idea is to utilize as much money as they can to drive everyday people away from voting. And they are a serious threat to democracy. And there's a brand new book by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse called The Scheme, which traces some of this back to a 1980s paper by a man who became a Supreme Court Justice, Lewis Powell, about how the business community could support and use money, much of it invisible, to shift national politics toward a very, at that point, it was pro-capitalist kind of policy. So I don't mean to be paranoid, but there are a number of books that have come out in the last couple of years, including books about the history of abortion, and some of them are a little bit technical. What I will do is share a book list with Connie and Sue that can be shared with the organization. But I think some of these authors are worth hearing about. We're to some extent, we're fighting against a shadow army that is well armed with money and people, and for whom feminism, voters' rights, abortion, racial rights, none of this is of interest to them. And so I think that, yeah, scheme, thank you very much for the there's also Dollars for Life, which is a book recently published about how the anti-abortion effort was funded and became connected to all of this. So it's, I will send some book titles that are worth, but we need to educate ourselves, and then we need to figure out how to influence both national and state policy to get to push back on this. And I agree about Citizens United, but I don't. People face overwhelming money issues, and they don't know what to do. You begin to feel powerless, and only by organizing and getting people to the polls can we have any power. So, thank you very much for the topic.
Yeah.
And I have another question. If Ann Martin is still on, I was wondering what Ann might be able to share about what senior communities are doing with getting out the vote, and particularly getting out the progressive vote among seniors. One of the statistics, of course, is that seniors tend to be more conservative. Ann, are you available to answer?
Well, I'm not sure I'm available, but I'm not sure I'm an authority on that. I can only speak from my own experience, and that is from a couple of senior centers with which I'm affiliated, or very active in getting out the vote. Whoever you vote for, their position is whoever you vote for, get out and vote. I am currently, since I moved to Maryland, I've been involved with the League of Women Voters, and again, on November the 8th, we'll be doing checking of, we're assigned routes. And for example, I have 5 polling places, and I will go in and be sure that the signs are in the right places and there's adequate access if you have mobility issues, and that there are, it was mentioned earlier in the meeting about translated materials, to be sure that there are translations available. So here, and Holly can attest to this, I think the League of Women Voters of Maryland is very active in getting out the vote. I'll make a personal confession. When I was younger, I belonged to the League of Women Voters because I've always voted, like all of you, since I first was eligible. My parents took me to register, and I don't believe I've ever missed an election. But as I was saying, the League is very active, and I was a member of the League of Women Voters, and then I decided that, well, maybe I was encouraging people. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I thought, well, maybe I'm encouraging people to come out and vote Republican. So I dropped my membership in the League of Women Voters. But now that I am considerably older, I have gone back to them, because I think one of the speakers mentioned that our democracy is at stake. And I really believe that. And the more I hear, and I really believe with the book that was mentioned starting in the 80s, everything I read is that there are more millionaires, there are more billionaires, they're working towards disenfranchising people. The issue in Georgia that was mentioned earlier about not being able to give somebody a drink of water when they're waiting for hours. I just fear for our country and for the country that we're leaving. For example, Sue, for your grandchildren and Sherry's children, I just think it's very troubling. So I have gone back to the League to encourage voting, regardless of who you vote for. We've got to save the democracy. So I'm not sure that answered your question, but that is, I just don't have any good perspective on what they're doing for seniors, other than the fact that I'm a senior and I'm encouraging people to vote. We have had here in Leisure World, a Democratic club, and they have been working every Wednesday with the Winning Wednesdays program, if people are familiar with that. So That's all for me, probably more than you ever asked for, but that's it.
It's helpful. Thank you.
I'd like to sort of add on to that. You know, in Georgia, the previous elections, I think when people realize what is at stake and everyone makes the effort to reach out, I'm, you know, very frequently people will say, well, look, you know, it's easy to count to 5. Just call 5 friends and make sure they vote. Make sure your families vote. Get them in the car and take them if necessary, and ask them to do the same. And that really can make a difference. There are many elections where it is then goes through recounts. There's elections where they're won by 1 vote or you know, 16 votes or something like that, where it really is tight. And so every vote does make a difference. And we really have to do something about these campaign finance laws, because it makes for a very unfair situation. And then I personally am horrified that my daughters and other young people have less rights than I did when I was their age. I can tell you, as a founder of an abortion fund, that over the years I have talked to a lot of women in very difficult situations, and now to think that there's these huge barriers and individuals who are not even seeking abortions, women are being impacted, and people are being impacted that are pregnant, and it's risking their lives. So I would like to also note that in the New York Times, there was a letter of 150 women asking the Senator Majority Leader Schumer, saying we have got to do something about pregnancies and pregnancies laws for working. So I'll quote this one that says, after I was pushed off the job due to my pregnancies, I had to use water in my son's cereals because I could no longer afford milk. I mean, there's people that are really in a bad place, and we all are at risk of being in a bad place if others are. This one says, everyone who said they're grateful to me for working the front lines during the pandemic, but now I'm pregnant, nobody will hire me. Or I'm asked to have a bottle of water when I was dizzy and nauseated from my pregnancy. I was nearly fainting every day, and my employer said no. And so the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, it's waiting, you know, with the votes to pass, but when will it be pulled up and inequality and injustice be faced? I mean, it's no different with the Equal Rights Amendment. It's fully ratified, and yet it's held up in our Senate, our US Senate, where they're still arguing about whether a preamble holds or not, when the states did not vote on that. So we really are in a difficult time. What really makes the difference is when we all personally reach out to others and ask every one of those people we reach out to reach out to 5 more people and make sure they get to the polls and vote. Thank you.
I'd like to probably just also mention, because the question had been asked to me about the African-American vote, and Sue had asked about the National Council of Negro Women, which is comprised of over 300 sections throughout the country and 36 national organizations, and what we were doing. And the National Council has just done what you were talking about. Our president, Dr. Thoma Daly, has been very active in getting out communications to all of the sections to share with others the importance of the vote, the election process, and the issues wherever they reside in terms of their counties and so forth. And we've also teamed up with the NAACP in getting out the vote. So it's all about teaming and working together and taking every step you possibly can to encourage others and get out the vote. And so we are actively involved in trying to do that. and will continue to do that. So I didn't want to serve as a panelist, Sue, but I would say we are actively involved in doing that. So
Great.
thank you for that. And let me just say before we go, I want to thank all of the panelists today that came on, and particularly, is it Miss Madalene? Because Sharon Wong had mentioned you highly. So thank you all for coming on. And happy birthday, Connie. You're muted, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Normally I don't, there was a long time where I didn't celebrate my birthday because a lot of bad things happened on my birthday.
Don't put the negative energy out there.
That's right. That's right. And then one of my friends said, but that's not you. I said, you're right. It's not. So
Yes.
you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone. Thank you so much, Sherry. Yes, you're right. You're right. And I want to thank everyone for coming. Madalene, thank you for taking time out of an incredibly busy travel schedule to spend an hour and a half with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you to every one of you people here who had something to add or to say. And to those who have come to listen, please spread the word to your friends. Sue, we don't have a brown bag now again until January, right? We've called these brown bags. The only thing that's gone is the brown bag.
that's right, until the fourth Tuesday of January. But I'd like to also call people's attention to a great show at Arena Stage, My Body, No Choice, that Molly Smith's last artistic production is the artistic director there. And it's really great. Sherry, do you want to comment on any of your reactions to seeing it?
Just that it was actually a semi-affordable thing at Arena too. It's for $18.
For $18,
Yeah.
And it's only for 18 days. So if you are interested.
November 6th is the last day of the production. And we have information on how to get in touch with it in the last page of the newsletter for October.
Yes, and it got an excellent review in Saturday's Post, by the way. It's a story of women telling their stories about abortion and reproductive health. And I think, you know, there comes a time you can't save a dead sinner. Let's just fix that up. So when people in churches say, well, it's a sin, well, you can't save a dead sinner, so you better start thinking about something else there, because you're going to lose them. So, but I want to thank you guys so much. This has been a really good brown bag. I entered this with trepidation, not sure what was going to come out of it, and it was fantastic. Thank you so much. And we will look forward to, we'll send you information, this abortion, Roe v. Wade and Dobbs decision, the next topic we're going to do, Sue. Is that the next one? Do you remember? We had a list. I don't have it in front of me.
We're good. And we also would like to encourage any of you to suggest meeting topics that are of particular interest. So
Right.
Let's get in touch.
Okay. All righty. So with that, I thank everyone for coming, and we'll get the newsletter out as quick as we can. And thanks especially to our speakers. And as a result of speaking, we make people honorary members for a year of the Clearinghouse. So we'll look forward to seeing you again, Madalene. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you. Thank you all. Thank you.